Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this very interesting little piece right here. This is the Editions G, that is, bullet knife, designed by Goody van Poppel. I'm sorry, my Dutch isn't very good. But it's an interesting piece from a brand that I hadn't really worked with before, and so that's kind of nice. Next thing, I want to thank very much my buddy Christian for donating to this channel, donating this to the channel in exchange for a charitable giveaway at the end there. This will go up in my next batch of charitable giveaway style knives, so that's great. Thank you very, very much for that, Christian. Next thing, size comparison. This is actually a reasonably large knife. It doesn't look it necessarily from the start, but it is. The whole scale of it is just a little bit deceptive. So there it is against your Spyderco Delica here. Here it is against your Ontario Rat number 1, and we'll throw up the Rat number 2 here. And so you can see here, this is actually not small in any way, shape, or form. The entire thing is just scaled up a little bit relative to what you might expect. So there's your size comparison real quick. The next thing, a note on the company Editions G is an interesting thing. It's a project out of, I believe, France, by a guy named Gregory Pohl, who, P-O-H-L, that is. And you can see here you get in each one a certificate of authenticity, which gives the number of the knife, etc. And interesting, very kind of an interesting approach here. So that's Editions G. This one, this knife particularly, is being made by Lion Steel, although I don't know who future ones are going to be made by in this line of editions, that is. But unfortunately, one thing that they are doing with all of these is to make these limited editions. You can see here, this one is number 140 out of 300. This is not ideal, unfortunately, at least in my estimation. We'll talk a little bit more about that on the ugly front, but what that basically means is that these are going to be a little bit hard to find because they are limited edition runs, and they will not be making additional ones of these. So, but that's what's going on with Editions G. It's just a series of limited edition knives by these designers and put together, or at least arranged, that is, by Gregory Pohl out there in the France. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, the ugly of this very interesting knife here. So on the good side, to start with, actually the machining on this is pretty solid. Lion Steel does some good work, and this was made by Lion Steel, as you saw during the disassembly. But nevertheless, it's well machined overall. I mean, things are well done here. Everything fits together nicely. We have, decent fit and finish here. Everything seems to work. I mean, you can't get too bad a shape here. The machining is pretty solid on this guy. Next thing, I do have to say, this does come in a very nice little case. It comes with this little guy right here. It's a big old, actually, it's a reasonably large case here, and it comes with this here. Comes with a little cutout for it, as well as a tube of nano oil, so there you go for the maintenance. So that's kind of a cool thing. It's frankly a much nicer case. Like, if this knife were mine, I would probably just repurpose this case for something else, just because it is actually a pretty nice little case. So, there you go. There's that. Next thing, this guy has a pretty nice blade here. It's an M390 blade. It doesn't say that anywhere on there, which is not necessarily ideal, but it's got a little bit of a Bowie knife style flair here with this the clip point going on. And it's got a nice grind to it. I like very specifically the fact that the grind is very quick. It kind of comes down to, and that means that this sharpening choil is actually a worthwhile sharpening choil. You can see there, that's the thickness behind the edge. Not incredible, but, for Lion Steel, actually pretty good. You've got yourself your little groove up there, and actually, let's see if I'm skilled enough to flick this out. Yeah, I need to use a little bit of wrist there, because I don't keep nails, but, and the detent isn't so super strong for flicking, but still, nevertheless, that works nicely. So I do like the blade a fair amount. It's a nice little blade here. Next thing, this has some nice details to it as well. I mean, to start with, one thing I noticed is that the entire blade spine here is contoured. This is a little detail, but it's one that actually adds a fair amount of comfort, and especially if you're going to choke up on this guy, that's pretty nice. The ergonomics of that are definitely an improvement there. It's also got this nice little pivot collar here, which you can see is symmetrical. It's same roughly on both sides, except on this side it's upside down now. But nevertheless, so you've got that going on there, which is a nice little detail. The texturing on this guy is actually pretty nice as well. It's an unusual texturing. It's not like aiming to be jigged the bone or anything, or maybe it is, I don't know. But, it's not a texture that's kind of, it's not like rock texture, which we've seen from Ansu. It's sort of its own little thing. I think they probably are actually thinking about this carefully. They're trying to kind of mimic the jigged bone look, but here, it works out. And you know what? It does offer some good texturing overall there. And, it does have a detent ball ramp, which is a nice little detail detail that I do appreciate and that does make this knife a lot more pleasant to close. And so that's nice. And then finally, the action on this guy is quite good. It flips 100% reliably. See, no wrist or anything, fires, no problems. It's got a nice heavy blade on it, so that makes that a little bit easier. And, on the closed side, works fine. And so that's good. And you can also flick it out, especially if you've got adamantium fingernails, can dig those up in there. But even me, with my relatively unskilled hands, I can get that flipped out, no problem. And so, you know what? I like it. The action on it is solid. So, to me, that's what's good here. It's got a very nice action, some nice details on it. It's got a nice blade, comes with a nice pelican case, and it is absolutely pretty well put together, nicely constructed there. On the great side, to me, are the ergonomics on this. This is a very nice knife in the hand. I have smaller hands than most, and so maybe your opinion would be different, but this works well in this kind of position here, as normally. Works fine like this, but I can choke up into here in this finger choil. And this is where this really shines. Because I'm right up close to the blade here, but I'm in no danger because I can't move my hand because there's this little guy right here in the middle there. This is just overall, ergonomically speaking, very nicely done. The clip is also well done. It's well rounded on all of the relevant dimensions here. I mean, ergonomically speaking, even look at the rounding of the clip up top here. This is just nice in the hand. I like this knife a lot in the hand. That's a beautiful thing. So, to me at least, that's what's great here, is that the ergos on this guy are absolutely good to go. Also, by the way, the texturing here is nice, although if you're using the finger choil, texturing isn't quite as important anymore anyways. So, but that's what's great, are the ergos. On the bad side, to start with, a little detail, but we are a little close to the edge in the back here. Luckily, it's just barely out of what I consider the danger zone, but it's still, come on, guys. Wish the stock were thinner so that wouldn't be an issue. Next thing, on the pivot collar here. I like the pivot collar, but it doesn't strike me to be a reason to have that on both sides here. I'd kind of like to see just the brass on one side and then the extra fancy stuff, the logos and whatnot on just the other side, on the clip side or something like that. I feel like that kind of cheapens it a little bit on the front side. Maybe that's that's taste, but whatever, not a big deal. Next thing, this guy is a little bit off center, unfortunately. It's not terrible, but it's just very slightly favoring the show side. It's not ideal, but it is a thing. And at this kind of a price point, we need to talk about that. Next thing, this guy has a pretty substantial burr around the detent hole, to the extent where, and I don't know if I pointed this out in my disassembly video, but you can actually see the detent hole, like you can see that little mound around the detent hole as you are kind of flipping it here. Maybe you can see it in there. Yeah, you can kind of see it raised up just a little bit around there. Now, look, I don't know whether this is by design or by accident, and that's part of the reason I didn't try to knock it down, because if the detent on this depends on that burr, that would be a bad thing if I knock that down, but it's definitely a thing, and it does mean that as you're closing this guy, there's a little bit of a positive close. It can't just drop shut. You need to really kind of push it down the rest of the way and to keep it in there. That's a little weird, but it is what it is, not a huge deal. Getting to be a bigger deal, this guy is pocket packing like crazy. You have a nice big old flipper tab on this guy that will be packing on whatever's in your pocket all damn day long. It's rounded, I'll say. Absolutely, they've done a lot to round it off here. The corners are nicely rounded. It's a reasonably well kind of melted surface, but at the same time, it's definitely there. And if you're not a big fan of big flipper tabs, you're not going to like this guy. Next thing, blade stock on this guy is just thick. So bust out the measuring stick here. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to measure the blade. Blade on this guy is coming in at 3.75 inches. That is something that I could consider to be bad. Like, personally, I don't care for. The size of this is a little bit excessive, but I don't think it's all that out of line, and it carries a little bit smaller than it is. So, I didn't bring that up, but anyways, it's a thing. But the one thing that is absolutely problematic is this blade stock thickness here. We are coming in just every damn day of the week at 0.15 inches worth of blade thickness. Oh, that's much. Look, by Lion Steel standards, yeah, that's what they're gonna do. I don't think they're aware that thin blade stock exists. But honestly, it doesn't do it for me, and it is still a little bit thick behind the edge. Like I said, by Lion Steel standards, they're doing okay, but that's an area where they could definitely improve. 0.15 inch blade stock is something I think that needs to be justified in a knife rather than being the default, and I don't know that it's justified here. And especially given the blade close to the back thing, that would just be better. I think this knife would just be a little bit better with thinner stock. Not a big deal, but it's definitely a thing. Next thing, the clip texturing. Unfortunately, although the clip is nicely textured, so is the area under the clip, which makes this guy a little less than pleasant to put into and out of the pocket. Got plenty of gription on there. This isn't going anywhere, but not a big fan of that. I like when companies will basically remove the texturing underneath the clip because, well, that's a really good idea. You shouldn't have texturing under the clip because it just makes things slide in and out easier. This is going to destroy your pants over time. Then finally, on the bad side, I mentioned already it's a little bit big. That's more of a subjective thing. But this is pretty heavy. It's 5.21 ounces for about 3.75 inches of blade. It's beefy. And a big part of that is the big thick blade stock coupled with the handles here. There is some internal milling in there to try and knock that down a little bit. But when your blade stock is this damn thick and the blade is this bit damn long, it's going to be a heavy knife. And it is indeed a heavy knife. And so I'm not a big fan of that. And so to me, that's the bad, is that it's a little heavy, clips over the texturing, the blade stock is very thick, it's pocket pecking, there is a burr around the detent hole, which may be by design or not, I'm not sure. It's a bit off-center. I wish the additional info was only on one side, and it's a little bit close to the edge in the back there, although not too dangerous. On the ugly front, two ugly issues here. To start with, it is preemptively abandoned. What I mean by that is this is a limited edition. That means that they have committed that no matter how good this knife is, they will only make 300 of them. I have a whole knife gripe about this. I'll put it down below, but limited edition needs to die in the knife making world. I'm sorry. It drives me absolutely nuts because nobody is really deriving value from limited editions, generally speaking. Unless it is like an upper echelon custom maker and they made 2 of them, your knife is not going to be worth all that much more when you try and sell it because of that number right there. Instead, what it means is that good designs tend to disappear and never show up again for sale, and they don't get iterated and improved. And this is a knife that could use a little bit of iteration and a little bit of improvement. For instance, make one a little slightly thinner blade, fix the texturing under the clip thing. There are some things that they could do to make this knife a little bit better, but it's not going to happen. This knife design is just dead at this point. Like they're making 300 of them, and then boom, we're over here, and then you're moving on to something else. And so, unfortunately, the fact that it's limited edition literally just means that if it's good, you won't be able to get one, and this won't ever have the opportunity to truly excel after rounds of iteration. So, although this is a fine knife, unfortunately, that decision means it's never going to be a great one because I think it was made with the wrong approach. Not everybody agrees with me, but limited edition companies are driving me nuts because, and especially as a reviewer, because like I'm filming this as relatively quickly to try and maybe get it out there before the last of these sells. But, come on, guys. It's just like, it drives me crazy. If it's a good design, don't abandon it preemptively. Sure, if it's not, if you're not selling a million of them, you can discontinue it, but don't give up on it before you start. That bothers the heck out of me. And in fact, the first time that Paul contacted me, actually, the only time that he contacted me, this came separately, but the time that he contacted me, I told him directly, no, I'm not interested in checking it out because by the time my viewers can watch it, it's probably going to be all sold out. It sounded a little slower than I anticipated they would, so maybe that's... But anyways, that just bugs the crap out of me. Watch the knife gripe below. But the other big issue with this guy, and the other ugly, is the price. At the current conversion rate for euros is, I think, 420 euros on their website. That works out to about $475 in the US here. That's a lot of freaking money. That is absolutely a lot of money. Yowza. And so it is very, very pricey for what you're getting here. And we'll talk about that more, I think, in the conclusion, but those are the two ugly things, that it is very expensive here in the States, and that it has been preemptively abandoned by the maker, as it is a limited edition piece. Not everyone agrees with me, by the way, on the limited edition thing. If you don't, tell me down in the comments, Nick, you idiot, limited editions are great, and then explain yourself. But anyways, let's go into the final conclusion here. And in the final conclusion, I will tell you that I think this is actually a pretty good knife. I mean, it's got a very nice blade to it. It's got a nice action. It's got some great details and some great ergonomics. I mean, really, this is great in the hand. And I can see somebody who particularly likes big, heavy knives, a little bit of a pirate's cutlass look to it. I don't freaking know. But I can see this being a knife that somebody would really, really enjoy. It does definitely have flaws, though. I mean, the pocket packing is a thing. The thick stock is... It's got a clip that's right over the text ring. It is heavy, and it is preemptively abandoned as a limited edition piece, so none of the issues can be fixed in future runs. But honestly, to me, this knife comes down to the price. $475 is just a bunch of freaking money, and it puts it up against pretty much everything in the high-end production knife market. And, think about it. Think of all the knives that are out there you could get for $475. You're in, like, Konigarius territory. Everything by Olamic, I think, is under that domain. You have things like Rayot Wee knives are pumping out amazing things. And, more intricate things, more different designs, that kind of stuff. I mean, it's way up there in the price, and that puts it against really, really high-end competition. If this knife were $300 or $350, I'd be like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, check this out. But an extra $100 slipped in there someplace. And that really, I think it fails to do as well against the competition in that domain. And, honestly, it's not offering anything that particularly novel. Maybe if you really like the design a lot, if you're looking at this like that's the most beautiful knife I've ever seen, then sure, you go for it. Then I think you're going to do fine. It's a nice knife. It is substantially well done, and if none of the things, then go for it. But honestly, at the end of the day, to me, it feels like another overbuilt titanium flipper flame lock. Flipper frame lock. There we go. I will say, maybe the situation is different in Europe. This is a European company. The price is in euros, and maybe it's the conversion rate that's given this trouble. I know that knife prices, generally speaking, are much higher in Europe, and so maybe over there, where a lot of the companies, a lot of the knives from some of the companies I just listed off, like Koenig or Olamic and that kind of thing, they're just not available, or they're not available at reasonable prices. Maybe over there, this is going to be a really big fish in a small pond, and as a result, this is really going to shine. If this turns out to be a budget price over in Europe, then absolutely, you're going to love this knife. There's a lot to like about it. But for me, here in the States, and looking at all the various competition around there at $475, this guy is quite nice, but it doesn't do anything to really distinguish itself. And the fact that it's just going to, be discontinued and whenever the last one sells off is just like, I have trouble getting up a full head of steam. So anyways, there you go. Hopefully this review airs before they're discontinued for good. At the very least, there's going to be one of the next charitable giveaway. And but I hope you found this interesting and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of the day. And if you do enjoy this guy, go ahead and bite the bullet. By the way, I just realized, I think they're going for shell casing here. Bullet. Okay. Not a brilliant man. Have a good one, everybody. Bye now.